Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, we are going to learn about one of the most powerful concepts in JavaScript, and that is loops. Loops basically allows us to run the same block of code multiple times without repeating the code manually. For example, imagine that I want to print numbers from 0 to 10 without loops. So how I can do? I can write console.log 1, console.log 2, 3, 4, so on and until 10. But what if I want to print number from 0 to 100 or from 0 to 1000? So at this point, loops came into picture. So loops are very essential for efficient coding. In this video, we will cover for loop, while loop, do while loop, for off loop, for in loop. These are the some basic loops that are mostly used in programming languages. I will explain all of these with easy explanation and examples for each. By the end of this video, you will be able to use these loops confidently in your programs to make them more effective and logical. So stay tuned till the end to master JavaScript loops. So let's get started. So here in VS Code, first of all, I will create a new file and file name is loops.js. So first of all, let's talk about for loop. For loop is one of the most commonly used loops in JavaScript. It allows us to run a block of code a specific number of times, making our code shorter, cleaner, and more efficient when we know exactly how many iterations that we want. So what is the syntax of the for loop? So first of all, we will write for keyword. After that, we write parentheses. Inside parentheses, so first of all, we will initialize a variable, then semicolon, and then we will specify the condition, again semicolon, and then we write increment function. After that, we write curly braces, and inside these curly braces, our code and logic that we want to execute multiple times. Let's discuss a very basic example that we want to print number from 0 to 20. So how we can solve this thing by using for loop? So first of all, we will write for, and then here, first of all, what we do, we will initialize a variable of count. So let count is equal to 0. So we want to start from 0. The next is condition. So here we will write condition. So what is our condition? Our condition is we want that when the number reaches 20, we want to stop this code. We don't want to print more than 20. We want only 20 iterations. So we will write that count is less than or equal than 20. So this is our condition. And then after this, we will write increment. So we will increment in the count variable. So count plus plus. Then curly braces. So now inside curly braces, we will write our code and logic that we want to execute multiple times. So here we want to console.log and we will write the value of count, and here we write the variable count. Okay. So now how this for loop works, how this for loop will be executed. So first of all, the very first thing is initialization. So whenever the first time for loop will be executed, so first it will initialize a variable that is count and its value will be 0. And then after this condition, after this initialization, it will go to the second point, that is condition. Now second is condition. It will check the condition, either count variable is having the value which is less than or equal than 20 or not. So if this condition will be true, then the loop will be finished. If this condition will not be true, then it will again repeating and repeating and repeating. So now the very first time the count value is 0, it will check 0 is less than equal than 20. Yes, the condition will be true. After this condition checking, all of the code that we write here inside the block, that code will be executed. After the finishing of this code, for example, if we have multiple lines of code, so all the codes will be executed, and after the execution of all the code inside the block, then it will go to the next increment function. Then it will increase the value of count by 1. So now this point, the count variable will be incremented and count value will be 1. So now after this increment, the count value become 1. Now it will again check the condition, either 1 is less than or equal than 20. If yes, it will again execute the whole block and then increment the function. So we want to execute only one line. So here I save the file, and if I run the file and I will write node loops.js. So you see, for loop printed the our count variable 20 times. It will start from 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it will go up to 20 times. So that's how for loop work. If we write only count variable here, again run the file, you see it prints the value of count variable from 0 to 20. The condition can be anything. So if I want to print the numbers from 0 to 200, it will again work the same. So if I again run the file, so you see count variable value for 200 will be printed. You see it starts from 0 and it goes up to 200. So the count variable will be printed 200 times. Similarly, we can use the decrement function here instead of increment. Now we are using the increment function. We can also use the decrement function. So how to do this? For example, I have the count variable and the value of count variable is like 50. Okay, I want to print reverse number from 50 to 0. So in this case, I will use decrement function. So the count value is 50. So the condition will be changed. I will write the condition that when the count variable is value greater than or equal than 0. Okay, now I am saying that the value of count variable is 50. As long as the value of count variable will be greater than or equal to 0, continue print this loop, and after this one I will write decrement function. So now the count variable will be decreased by 1. So if I save the file, so now the numbers will be printed from 50 to 0 in the reverse format. If I run the file, so you see it starts from 50 and then it is decreased by 1 every time and it comes to 0. So now this is the basic for loop. We should also take care of some points while working with the loops, that we should not take our loop into the infinite loop. For example, what is the infinite loop? For example, if I don't write anything here, I just write semicolon, I also removing this and I am also removing this. So now I am just writing two semicolons. The first parameter is initialization. I am not initializing anything. The second parameter is condition. I am not specifying any condition. The first parameter is empty, second is empty, and the third is also empty. So now here, if I want to write like const count is equal to 2. So now what will happen? An infinite loop will be started. Why? Because the condition will always be true. As long as the condition will be true, this code will be executed repeatedly. So now in this case, if I save the file, now if I run the file, then you will see that the number 2 that is continuously printing on the console. So if I run the file, so you see it is printing. So if I go here, it is continuously printing. So I need to stop this. Control C. So now you see how many times it will be printed, a lot of times, because it will go to the infinite loop. So let's write it back. So we write let I is equal to 0 and we write the condition I less than 10 and then decrement less than 10, and the next parameter is increment function, which is I plus plus. So now instead of count, we will print I, because now our variable is I. So this is the basic for loop. So now there is another thing in the for loop, that so instead of increment function, here I can increase the value of I by 2 each time. For example, I want to increase the value of I 2 times. For example, first before I was increasing by 1, so the now I want to increase the value of I by 2. So for this I will write the addition assignment operator, which is plus 2 plus equal, and then I will specify that how many times I want to increase the value of I. So in our case, I want to increase by 2, and instead of 10, I will write 100. So now you will see that every time the value of I will be increased by 2. First it is 0, then it will check the condition. If it is true, it will execute the block of code, and then after execution it will increase the value of I by 2. If I write here equal less than equal, so now here I will get all the even numbers from 0 to 100. For example, instead of 0, if I start from 2, save the file, so now I will get all the even numbers from 2 to 100. So if I run the file, so you see I am getting all the even numbers 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. Why? because I am increasing the value of I by 2. Every time the value of I is increases by 2. So we can also take care of some points while working with the for loops, that we can increment or decrement by any number, not just only one. We can also take care of the condition. If the condition is never false, it creates an infinite loop which can crash our program. So while working with the for loops, we should be careful. The next one is while loop. The while loop in JavaScript is used to execute a block of code as long as the specified condition is true. Unlike the for loop, it is generally used when we don't know in advance that how many times we want to run the loop. For example, when we don't know that how many iterations we want from the loop, at that point we are using while loop. So what is the syntax of while loop? So first of all, we will write while and then parentheses. Inside parentheses, we will write condition and then we will write curly braces. And inside curly braces, we have our code or logic that we want to execute repeatedly. So let's understand this. Here is the while loop and then condition. So before each iteration, it will check the condition. Either the condition is true, then it will execute the block of code. After executing the block of code, it goes back to check the condition. If the condition is again true, it will again execute the block of code. If the condition is false, then the loop will be stopped. So take a practical example. For example, I have a variable let x is equal to 1, simple variable, and then I am writing the while loop. So what is the syntax? First of all, I will write while, then parentheses, then I will specify the condition. So in our case, I want that as long as the x will be less than 20, then curly braces, as long as the x will be less than 20, I want to print out the value of x. Okay. Or I can say here that value of x, and I use template literals, and here I will write the value of x. Okay. So now if I just save the file, if I run the file, so this will become an infinite loop. Why? Because the value of x is 1 and here is the condition, which is either x is less than 20. Yes, x is less than 20 and this evaluation becomes true. So inside condition we get true, this code will be executed and then again it will go to check the condition will again be true, and now again it will be printed because we are not changing the value of x with every iteration. So that's why every time it checks the condition, every time the condition will be true. If I run the file, so you will see I will get an infinite loop. So you see it is continuously printing value of x 1 1 1 1 1 1. Why infinite loop? Because every time the condition will be true, every time it will check the condition will be true and it will again execute the loop. So here we can increase the value of x by 1. So we will write here an increment function. So now every time the value of x will be increased by 1. So now in this situation, whenever the value of x reaches to less than 20, whenever the value of x reaches to 19, then this code will be stopped. This loop will be stopped. So if I save the file and now if I run the file, so you see it starts from 1 and it goes up to 19, which is less than 20. Okay. So why? Because every time we are increasing the value of x, first time it's value 1, then it will execute the loop and then we increase the value of x by 1. Second time its value become 2. Again check the condition, 2 is less than 20. Okay. It printed 2. Then 3, 4, 5, 6, similarly so on. Whenever its value become 19 is less than 20, it execute, and when we increment the function and the value of x become 20, so now 20 less than 20, no, it is false. So when this condition becomes false, the loop will be stopped. So make sure to update the counter variable inside the loop, otherwise it will result an infinite loop that we see before that can crash our program. In the while loop, the condition is checked before executing the loop. If the first time, initial time, the condition become false, our code will not be executed not only once. For example, if I change the condition, so in this case, this condition will become false initially because 1 is not greater than 20. So in the initially very first time, this condition become false. So this block of code will not be executed not only once. If I run the code, so you see nothing is printed, nothing is executed. Why? Because initially the condition become false. The next one is do while loop. The do while loop in JavaScript is similar to the while loop, but with one major difference. The do while loop executes the block of code at least once before checking the condition. So what is the syntax of the do while loop? So this is the syntax of do while loop. First we write do, then curly braces, block of code in which we write our code and our logic. And after the block of code, after the curly braces, we write while and then we check the condition. In this case, the block of code, this block of code, this runs once without checking any condition. So while the first time the code start executing, it will execute the block of code. In the previous example, in the while loop, if initially the condition become false, the block of code will not be executed. But in do while loop, the block of code will be executed before checking the condition first time. If the condition false, then it will be executed only one time. If the condition is true, it will again go run the code, run the block, and then it will again check the condition. As long as the condition will be true, it will be executed repeatedly, and when the condition become false, it will stop the loops. So let's take an example of the do while loop. So here if I create a variable x is equal to 1, and I write do while loop, do block of code, and here I write while and then condition. So I want to print numbers that are x is less than equal than 20. So I want to print numbers from 1 to 20. So here I write console.log number and I embed the variable value of x. So now how it works? The first value of x will be 1 and it will start execution. First it will execute this block and it will print the value of x. Then it will go to and check the condition. So condition will be true. It will again go and again execute the same block of code. So in our case, this is an infinite loop. Why? Because we are not increasing the value of x. So every time it will check the condition, the value of x will be 1, which is always becomes the true. So this is an infinite loop. To make it a finite loop, inside the block of code, we should increase the value of x by 1. So from avoiding the infinite loop, we write an increment function that increases the value of x by 1. So now, as long as the x will be less than or equal than 20, it will be executing this block, and when this condition becomes false, it will stop the loop. So if I save the file and if I run the file, so you will see that we get number from 1 to 20. So you see, we are getting number from 1 to 20. If I comment the increment function, then it will make an infinite loop. So if I here, now you will see it will go an infinite loop. So you see it is printing. So stop the code. So now we will check that if we write the condition here false initially, okay. So now this condition is false. X is greater than 20, which is a false condition, false statement. So whenever the condition is false, that block of code will be executed at least once. At least once it will be executed. So if I save the file and if I run the file, so you see number 1 will be printed. So what is happening? X is equal to 1. So first it will come to the loop, and first of all it will execute this block of code one time. So it console.log number value of x1, then it will increase the value of x, and after the execution of loop it will check the condition. If x is greater than 20, which is a false condition, so then loop will be stopped. What is the difference between while loop and do while loop? In the while loop, if the condition is initially false, the block of code will not be executed not only once. But in the do while loop, if the condition is start in the initially, the block of code will be executed at least once. So that is the major difference between both of two. The next one is for off loop. So what is for off loop? The for off loop in JavaScript is basically used to iterate over iterable objects, such as we have arrays, we have strings, maps, sets, etc. So over all those things we can use for off loop. It allows us to access each value directly without using an index. Okay, so we can directly get the access of the value. So now, what is the syntax of the for of loop? So for using for of loop, first of all we will write for keyword, and inside parentheses we create a variable. So let's name the variable element, and then we use the of keyword, and after the of keyword we write the name of the iterable object, and then curly braces. So inside curly braces here we write code or logic. So let's see a practical example that how we can use the for of loop. We create an array and the name of array is fruits. So inside this array we are writing the name of some fruits like apple, mango, banana and orange. So now we want to use the for of loop on this array. So how to do this? First of all we write for keyword, and then we create a variable, and let's name this variable simple fruit. And then after this we use the of keyword, so we write of, and after this we write the name of the iterable object. So in this case, in our case, the iterable object is our array which is fruits, so we write the name of the array, so which is fruits. In the curly braces we write our code. So let's console.log here, and I can write the backticks, and inside backticks, I will write that I love to eat, and I will use template literals. So here I will write the fruit. So now how this works? The for of loop, it will iterate over this array. This fruit variable will get the access of the value in each iteration. So if I save the file and if I run the file, I will write using node and the file name loops.js. So you see, I love to eat apple, I love to eat mango, banana, orange. So the for of loop iterates over this array which is fruits, and in each iteration this fruit variable that we create here, this fruit variable has the access of the value. So you see here, each value will be printed in each iteration. For of loop we use then we want to iterate over values in an iterable object like in arrays or strings or sets. So the for of loop is cleaner and less error prone than the classic for or the for in loop. The for of loop works beautifully with many data structures. The next one is for in loop. The for in loop in JavaScript is basically used to iterate over the properties of an object. Okay, so for in loop is used to iterate over the properties of an object. It loops through keys or property names, not the values directly. So in JavaScript, the for in loop is mostly used along with the objects. So whenever we want to iterate over the objects, we mostly use the for in loop. The for of loop is mostly used to iterate over the arrays, but when we want to iterate over the objects, we mostly use the for in loop. So let's create an object first here. I create an object and I name my object obj, and here is an object. So here I want to create some key value pairs. So I am writing the name of some famous companies and Facebook. This is Instagram, and now Amazon. So this is our object, and I'm going to use for in loop to iterate over this object. So when we are using for in loop, first we write for keyword, and then inside parentheses first we initialize a variable. So let's name this variable key. So why here I am naming the variable key? We can name anything to this variable, but here I am naming this variable key. So why I am naming this variable key? Because we know that the for in loop is basically iterate over the keys of this object. Okay, so after this I will write the in keyword, and then I will write the name of the object, and in our case that is obj. So after that curly braces. So here I write the code. So here I console.log. So now if I want to print all the keys of the object, I just write here, because this loop iterates over all the keys of this object. In each iteration, this key variable holds the single key of this object. So if I want to print the keys of this object, I just simply write here key. So in our case, if I save the file, so now you will see that all the keys will be printed in the console. So if I run this file, so you see all the keys will be printed. So now if I want to print all the values, so how to print this? So here we will use the method of an object for getting the access of the values. So I write the object name, that is obj, scare braces, and inside scare braces I will write key. So this is the method due to which we can get the access to the values of the object. So now in each iteration, at this point the key variable holds the name of the property, single property, and then on this basis we can get the value of the property. So now you will see that in the console we will get all the values, not the keys. We will get all the values. So if I save the file and if I run the file, so you see now I am getting the values of the object, not the keys. So this is how we can use the for in loop along with the objects. The for in loop is basically not recommended when we are dealing with the arrays. Why? Because in case of arrays, we directly want the access to the values, but the for in loop iterate over the keys of the object. Okay, so if we use for in loop along with the arrays, this lead to unexpected errors or unexpected results in some cases. So when we are dealing with the arrays, we should use for of loop, and when we are dealing with the objects, we use the for in loop. That's all about loops in JavaScript. I hope now you clearly understand all the loops. Practice these loops daily to improve your coding skills. If this video helped you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.